Here's what I'm seeing right now. So this is a triad, actually. One, having one of the three, eczema, asthma, or allergies, predisposes you to having the other two. And all of that sounds pretty scary, but I have some good news. And the good news is that there's so much we as parents and even as adults can do to reverse these problems by looking at the root cause.
Let's ditch the quick fix and dive into today's conversation. Welcome, everyone. My guest today is Dr. Nelli Gluzman. Dr. Gluzman utilizes a holistic, functional, and integrative approach to medicine. This approach is one that focuses on the root cause of soft signs and dis-ease in children, which can almost always be traced back to gut health and nutrition. Dr. Mom, as her patients have fondly nicknamed her, is dedicated to helping each child live happier, healthier, and more fulfilling lives, free from the dis-ease caused by the imbalanced gut. She forms a strong relationship with each family she treats and creates a customized path to healing for each family as a whole. Dr. Gluzman has been a practicing pediatrician in New York for over a decade. She received her medical degree from the New York College of Osteopathic Medicine, completed her pediatric residency at Jersey Shore University Medical Center, New Jersey, and is a board-certified fellow of the American Osteopathic Board of Pediatrics. Welcome, Dr. Gluzman. It's great to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me on.
So essentially, wanted to just dive right in. You're taking care of children who have chronic illnesses, and that's a wonderful thing to be doing. I'm excited to get into this conversation. What are the primary conditions that you treat?
So chronic illness is a kind of it's an epidemic right now of I'm just going to jump right into it and say it. There's an epidemic of chronic childhood illness in the US. And it's not that I chose to take care of kids with chronic illness. It's becoming more and more rampant, and there are not a lot of solutions out there in the world of conventional medicine that look at the root cause of the problem. So in conventional medicine, we're really great at treating emergencies and relieving symptoms. And if your child has something like eczema or allergies or asthma or constipation, goes on and on, we could, in conventional mainstream medicine, absolutely take care of the symptoms. But there is not much done to take care of the root cause of the issue. And so I found so many parents stuck in this loop of having a child that's having constant symptoms over and over again, and they're able to treat the symptoms, and the child can get rest overnight and the rash will go away. They're able to relieve the wheezing, for example. They're able to poop, but not much else is done to look at the root cause and to heal that. And so that's where I come in. I take care of the root cause of what's happening to your child over and over again. So it's not the occasional symptom, it's not the occasional cold, but it's more like if your child is having symptoms over and over again, and you as a parent are stuck in this loop of going to your specialist all the time and getting a lot of prescriptions and asking yourself, like, what's the best steroid cream, or worrying about whether or not you took your inhaler with you everywhere you went, or your EpiPen. Those are the kids that I treat.
That you work with. What's the prevalence that you're seeing as far as with asthma and eczema and allergies, things of that nature?
Oh, the question just gave me chills from the top of my head to the bottom of my spine, because a lot of times, I think that the number is actually very much underreported, and I'll tell you why. In general, we're seeing a very large increase in the prevalence and incidence of chronic wheezing or asthma, allergies, and eczema, those three. I would say on average it's about 12% now. That's a huge increase from about 20 years ago. But I'm also worried that a lot of parents are underreporting it, because if you just have like an occasional or non-occasional itching, and you need to use over-the-counter steroid creams, that's eczema, but it's not necessarily considered a diagnosis. I'm seeing more and more parents come in to see me, and I'll be like, what medications is your child on? And they start leaving off all the over-the-counter allergy medications, the Zyrtex, the Claritins, the Flonase, all those over-the-counter meds. So the child might be experiencing chronic allergy symptoms all the time, but that's not necessarily them being diagnosed with allergies. And I'm seeing that more and more. Like I'm starting to see that with asthma. I'll ask the parents, like, what medications is your child on? And then I'll see somewhere remotely that there are no albuterol and they need to use it all the time. But that's not even considered to be a medication anymore. That is scary.
Very scary. And essentially, I think that you have stated in the past that you've kind of seen children are basically chronically medicated as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and that's kind of what you're saying is basically you're having this cycle that you never get off of, and then you just continue this chronic medication, and that doesn't really help the body heal.
Yes, exactly. So it will get rid of the symptoms, but it won't let the body, it's not going to help the body heal. And I've been lecturing medical students and resident physicians in like a conventional hospital setting, future doctors about this. And when I ask them, like, how does the antacid that this child is taking and that you're prescribing, future doctor, how is that going to actually solve the root cause of this? And it's like, the first time ever the light bulb will go off in their minds, because no one's ever asked them to look at it that way, the difference between root cause approach versus not. I'm also noticing that just because there are so many kids right now who have allergies, food allergies, for example, peanut allergies, anaphylactic food allergies, life-threatening allergies, just because about 2 kids in every average size classroom of about 30 has an anaphylactic food allergy, and they have to have an EpiPen everywhere they go, just because it's so common, it doesn't make it normal or okay.
Exactly. And what are you finding to be part of the root cause? What is the big emphasis that you're really targeting?
So it's multifactorial. There are so many different reasons. It's never the same reason for 2 different kids. But what I'm noticing more and more in the approach that I take is, without a healthy and diverse microbiome, all the kinds of bacteria and the viruses and the yeast that live in, all the microbes that live in the human body and in the gut, and a healthy endothelium or gut lining, that's usually, it needs to be healthy for everything else to work. So we're not just worried about gut health when it comes to digestion and absorption, but we're also looking at it for detox. And so I look at gut health as the foundation of all health, and that's starting to be affected more and more in children. And the great thing is that we can actually test babies and kids non-invasively with urine and stool tests to see what's going on. The technology caught up with that. And so we have the data as practitioners to see that there is a problem and how bad the problem is. And so my approach is one of many different kinds of approaches when it comes to holistic root cause treatments. But I focus first on healing the gut and then everything else.
Everything past that. And, is just kind of circling back a little bit, one of the hardest things on the gut is the medications that we're taking. We might have some epigenetic realities, but throwing in the epigenetic part of that includes medications. Gut health is so huge, and it has such an impact on the immune system. But I think you also have a certification in the gut and psychology connection too. And there's a gut and psychology syndrome. And as my understanding, are you the only one that's certified in this?
There are many different practitioners in different specialties, but as of right now, I'm the only pediatrician that is certified to be a GAPS or gut and psychology syndrome practitioner. And what that means is I was trained specifically to heal the gut in a very intensive way. And that kind of protocol is reserved very often for very sick kids who have tried it all. They've been on multiple medications, and their parents are just not satisfied with the solutions that mainstream or conventional medicine is giving them alone.
Gotcha. And it's having a big emotional impact on emotional well-being.
The emotional well-being on the parents and also on the child.
Okay.
So, yeah, absolutely.
So what are some of the other toxicities? So, we've talked about medicines. What are some of the other toxicities that kids are exposed to really basically right from birth?
So I have a few pet peeves, like right from birth. I still work in a hospital setting, and it is, just give a few examples. When a baby is first born, the parents always ask me, like, which lotion is best for my child? But if you're looking at these goodie bags that they're given, most lotions and creams and baby care products are laden with chemicals, and then it goes on and on. And so my point is, just because something is created for a baby doesn't make it healthy for somebody. And you could actually, you parents listening out there, or not parents, if anybody's interested in how many different toxins that we know are dangerous to human beings and to all life forms are out there in products that are sold to consumers, you could check it out really easily by going to the Environmental Working Group database. It's a non-biased database that reviews different products, and I use it all the time. And it's shocking because you'll see a product that's made for a baby, and it is known to have ingredients that disturb the microbiome, disturb the are carcinogenic, that are endocrinological disruptors, on and on. And so I highly recommend, and maybe you can also quote it in the show notes, Environmental Working Group is a database that anyone can use. It's free to evaluate and to become a more conscientious and empowered consumer when buying products, especially for a young child who is not able to detox the same way as an older person can.
Gotcha. Yeah, so I wrote that down. Environmental Working Group, is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Just a little bit of a follow-up question there on the exposures for children, the toxic exposures. What are some of the other toxic exposures they get in their environment as they're, growing in the home and in their environments that they spend time in?
So another exposure that I spent some time, I'm kind of concerned about, is glyphosates and how much there is out there in like groundwater, and in, if you have a child who's like running around on a lawn, what are we spraying on that lawn? So these exposures might be a little bit, for younger kids, are different than for older kids or adults even. Let's say you have a little kid and they're the ones that are crawling on the floor. So what are we using to clean the floor with? Or who's running on your lawn? Is it barefoot or kind of on the ground? So glyphosates, the kinds of chemicals we use for cleaning our floors and things like that. Right now we have a really high toxic burden from all the spraying that's being done in playgrounds and all the public surfaces and in schools because of the cleaning that needs to be done for COVID to make it safe, for example.
Sure.
So these exposures, plus you have air pollution, for example. I know there hasn't, thank goodness, been so much of that like in the West Coast, but this time last year it was a big problem. And what population are the ones that are breathing almost twice as much per minute as an adult? Those are the kids. So that all comes into play. There's so many things to be worried about, but I try not to think about, or try not to explain to parents like what are the things that you could be worried about. Instead, try to control for what you can. And it's not usually air pollution outside or exposures outside the home, but you can control for a child's what they're eating. If they're eating seasonal and organic and local foods, are they getting exposure to sunshine as a nutrient or not? Are they able to detox properly because they're pooping properly? So
Right.
Those are the things that I like to focus on in my practice, the things that you can control for without stressing people out.
Yeah. And are you seeing, kind of just not really to get too deep into it, but are you seeing, with kids being a little bit more restricted for at least a while there, they were restricted to staying in their home rather than getting outside? And I know it's different in the urban areas compared to rural areas, but do you find a big difference when you're confined to being inside and not able to get outside?
So the big difference, it would be so easy and so simple if we had some kind of issue and then you'd have a response to that issue by the body almost immediately. So the problem with this underlying these chronic symptoms and things like autoimmune disease, they develop really slowly, and you can't necessarily through studies link an exposure or a problem that caused this to something that happens many years down the line and flies under the radar for some time. So for kids who were home all of last year, my worry as somebody that is really focused on microbiome health is that their immune system hasn't been stimulated the same way that it would have been if they were exposed to other kids this whole time. And so now they're going back to school, and my worry is that it's going to be like harder for them to get over colds, regular plain old childhood illnesses that kids get, because they have not been exposed. Everything was super clean. And so their immune system kind of starts to forget how to fight infections the same way.
Yeah, it gets a little bit weaker, of course. It's a very good point. And then you miss out on some of the fresh air and sunshine and things of that nature as well.
I can say that it really is not just sunshine. It's actually a nutrient for the body, and it regulates so many things in the body, and it regulates hormones in our body too. So it not only that, but like vitamin D levels, which are so important to making sure healthy, natural vitamin D levels in the body are so important for all processes, not just immune health, which is what it's kind of popular for right now. And many parts of the Northeast where I'm in New York, it's fall now, and it's harder and harder to get sunshine. And so I'm reminding all the parents and adults to spend some time outside, well, especially in the morning when the sun is, so you could regulate your circadian rhythm so that everything else works well. So those are the small things that we can do to make a really huge impact in a positive way for our children and our health.
So are you seeing overlap with these kind of conditions? We're seeing a rapid increase in these conditions over the last 20 years, like you shared when we first started. Are you seeing overlap? Like, are somebody that has eczema also kind of prone to having allergies, and somebody that has, asthma prone to having allergies, that kind of thing?
Yep. Here's what I'm seeing right now. So this is a triad, actually. One, having one of the three, eczema, asthma, or allergies, predisposes you to having the other two. And I'm seeing, it's not that I'm seeing this, it's also a well-studied and known pattern that kids are no longer outgrowing these previously childhood illnesses. We're having more and more children turning into adults who have the same problems. So children are not outgrowing it. One predisposes you to having the others. And it's a lot of, in mainstream medicine, we're told like, this is just genetic. Yes, of course, there's a genetic component. But what about the epigenetics of it? Because the numbers are skyrocketing, it can't just be genetic, because the same people are having the same kids. And so it's the whole of the environment, both internal and external to your child, that's causing these rapid rises. So yes, I'm seeing a triad. It's usually eczema and allergies linked very closely together. And all of that sounds pretty scary, but I have some good news. And the good news is that there's so much we as parents and even as adults can do to reverse these problems by looking at the root cause.
The root cause, yes. So that's so important. I had mentioned before we started recording, there's a Children's Health Defense. They'd published they've reported that in 1986, 12% of children had chronic illnesses, including the three we're kind of focusing on today, but others too, ADD, ADHD, those kinds of things. And they report that today, like you said, it's rapidly progressing, and they're reporting it's probably closer to 54% of children that have some type of a chronic illness today compared to 12% in 1986. And we know what you've shared, in talking here, that the conventional approach has always been kind of a symptom approach. Hey, let's do a steroid cream, let's do a medication, an EpiPen, an inhaler. And those are great. I have a daughter who's had asthma, and she needs to keep that inhaler with her because she gets an environmental exposure to a horse dander, and it's really life-threatening. So it's really cool that we have these emergency opportunities. But unfortunately, they've been used as a healing tool, and people use them to just, manage the symptoms. So the symptom approach is kind of that quick fix approach, and we need that sometimes. And I'm rambling on here to say, love you to kind of point out some of the natural, things that you're using, and the testing, the nutrition, and some of the foods and ideas that you have to help your families actually heal rather than just try to do a quick fix.
I just want to preface by saying there are many different kinds of approaches and modalities that are do similar things. And this is just my approach with my patients in my practice, that I found to be most effective to start the process of healing and reversing these chronic illnesses. And when I say chronic, I mean if your child is experiencing symptoms for more than like a few months, and if your child is on medications all the time, and if you feel like it's kind of like a soft diagnosis, but you also have to look at all the soft signs. Is your child having poor sleep? Are they not pooping fine? Okay, that's not necessarily a diagnosis. So the approach that I take with my patients is, first, we help the body detox by not giving it a lot of toxicity. So we start to eliminate all of the food that is not food, all the chemicals in the foods, all the junk food. Definitely we eliminate the sugar, and we will eliminate most of the time dairy and gluten for some time, even if there's no overt allergies, because there's just so much inflammation associated with these foods, and we're trying to allow the child's body to heal. So we eliminate the things that might be throwing that child over the edge with toxicity. The kinds of cleaning products we're using, the kinds of personal care products also we look at. So that is done. We kind of get rid of everything. I have one rule that parents must follow. It's that you cannot be stressed in the process. You cannot feel guilty about it, because it's a little bit jarring when you take a look at all the things that your child was exposed to that might not have been very healthy for them. Second step would be to give a child the building blocks that they need to heal, replace the nutrients. And one of the easiest ways that I do this is by encouraging parents to start them on juicing, like at least a few times a week in the morning, to help boost the body's nutrients. That will help all around. But then we get to the really important part, which is to actually heal the gut. So I use stocks and broths very often, and healthy fats to heal and seal the gut lining. And then we restore the microbiome. And I like to do this most often by using fermented foods instead of just supplements. So that's kind of like the short and the short of it. It is individualized for every family. You have to also remember that these are kids, and you can't always convince a 2-year-old to eat fermented foods. And so we work to make sure that this is a livable approach that is not stressing the whole family. And sometimes it could take 3 months, sometimes it can take a month, and sometimes we work together for a year and take small steps little by little so that it doesn't stress out the family. And then there's testing.
Yeah, so come back to that testing. You're kind of hitting some of the challenges that all parents have. How do I get my children to eat their fruits and vegetables? That kind of thing. But you're actually talking about healing the gut, and we're talking about bone broth and stocks and soups and things of that nature. What's kind of the trick?
Oh, yeah.
There.
Oh, you're looking for a bag of tricks? I got it. So the trick with stocks and broths is there are a lot of different tricks. I mean, it depends on the age. First of all, I'm not against bribery. Okay. Like I don't think it's wrong if that's what needs to be done. Yeah, but you can't really do that for like a 1 or 2-year-old, because they just don't. You can't do it.
Sure.
So for those kind of kids, if they're really resistant, then you can cook with these products. So if you're using mixed soups, you can use bone broths and stocks anywhere that you would use any kind of fluid for cooking. That's a possibility. But drinking stocks and broths on an empty stomach is best. And something that has been working really well with families is offering warm broth or stock between meals instead of water or whatever because their kids tend to get thirsty. So instead of offering them their usual beverage, offer that first. And offer it before a meal, because they'd be more apt to try it, to drink it if they're kind of hungry and thirsty.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. That works really well, but to be honest, most kids end up liking it. And so making sure that your child sees you eating that is very helpful. With things like fermented foods, if a child is like old enough, they could help you make it, and they'd be more willing to eat it. Younger kids, you could actually hide stuff like beet kvass, which is a fermented beet beverage, in a smoothie that you have in the morning. And the taste is really easy to hide because it's sweet and it's bright red, so it doesn't even look weird. Things like sauerkraut could be hidden on, you could put it on any meal where you would have salt. And so the taste is kind of hidden. And kids love fermented carrot sticks, and it's a finger food. So you could just have that as a snack. That's like a big favorite. So you don't have to necessarily eat handfuls of sauerkraut to get like fermented foods into the system.
Sure. And so I imagine in your working with families, these are the details that you work with them on, right? Is kind of coaching them along this pathway. Because I know, I've got a lot of grandkids, and it's hard to each, if a family's got 3 or 4 or 5 kids, you got 3 or 4 or 5 kids that have different tastes and sensitivities, and it's a challenge. I'm sure you know that very well.
Yeah, I do. I'm a parent, and I also started off not loving these things personally, so I totally get it. I just don't love stocks and broths that much. But these are the prescriptions that I write. So if you could convince your child to take a medicine every day, and handfuls of medicines, or do a nebulizer treatment, and you could probably do this as a prescription too. These are prescription grade healing modalities. I also, your parents listening out there, if you could figure out for me and have any tips on how to get a kid to take fish oil, I'm still looking for solutions. That's the hardest part. So without doing it as like a gummy, because that's the best I've got for very picky kids. Fish oil is a hard one. So my challenge to your listeners is to send me a message if you figured it out.
On the fish oil, that's a really good one. So let's go ahead and circle back to the testing that you do for your children.
We don't usually start with testing. So much changes if you're doing a very thorough healing modality for the gut. And I also have to be mindful of the resources that parents are busy and moms and dads are busy. And the testing, the great functional medicine testing is wonderful because it's not invasive. It's not usually blood work. It could be done at home, which is great, but you have to fill out a form, and you have to get the box, and then you have to sit your kid down, and you have to send that urine or the hair, and then you have to go and follow that, and then you have to make an appointment again. So, and it's expensive sometimes. So Sure. It has a time and place. And what I found is that I don't do much testing until we do a healing gut protocol for a month or 2, unless there's something very specific that we're looking for. And the testing can range. It really depends on exposures. I have a lot of kids who are exposed to mold because they live in old buildings and in New York, because they're not living in homes. And so we do testing for that if that's what's necessary. But then there are kids who overall just have gut issues, and then we'll do a oat test, a urine oat test. It really depends on what you're sending for. There are a lot of testing available now that are direct to consumer. I'm a little bit skeptical of those, and I've done them, and I don't love that they're always you'll do it and then it'll tell you what's wrong and what foods are best for you. But a month later, that database will get all new information because it's a system that's learning, and it will give you new recommendations. And it's just automated recommendations. And I don't love that. And I don't recommend it to the families that I work with. These direct to, you could do your own gut testing. That's what I found to be true. The technology is incredible, but you need to have a provider that you're working with that really knows and understands what is just access information and what needs to be addressed. And this is especially important for kids because you'll have a lot of, usually the results are based for an adult, healthy adult, and not for a child.
Yeah, it makes sense. And kind of getting close to wrapping up here a little bit. Any other thoughts that we haven't touched on that you would like to share and would be helpful?
Sure. So we talked a lot about scary things out there. Mm-hmm. And sometimes when I have these conversations, even I get overwhelmed as a parent. There's so much out there that is dangerous. There's so many things that we can't control for, and there's so many pollutants out there and toxins, and the number is going up and up and up. And there's so many things to be worried about. But my message to you, moms and dads who are listening, is that there's so much you can do, especially with a younger child, as early as possible. If you're feeling like there's something is off. If you're not willing to just take the Band-Aid approach, there's so much you can do to reverse these chronic childhood illnesses. There's so much you can do that is not going to stress your family out.
Well, I think that's so important. I'm glad you point that out and put emphasis on it, because it's, when people come into the office, your office, my office, too many times you get so focused on the symptom and the cause, and the fix, kind of loses the luster, if you will. But it is a good fix, like you're sharing with the listeners, that essentially once kids start drinking bone broth, they start liking it, and it is a healthy prescription, and it actually has an ability to rejuvenate the body's intestinal lining, which is so complicated and so important for them to get the best nutritional value and support their immune system. And so I love that emphasis. We have to give people hope and let them know that there's a lot they can do. And it's really just a paradigm shift. If once you start living with a different reality, we might not love bone broth in comparison to some things, but we know that it's something that's positive, and then we start feeling better. You can start, I'm sure you see a lot. Why don't you share a couple of success stories that you've seen with complicated patients, to give the listeners some hope there?
Yeah, most, it's not that I kind of chose to be an expert in eczema. This is the problem that most kids come to me with these days, just because of the numbers skyrocketing and the solutions not being that great out there in conventional medicine. All they say is avoid the trigger. Many times you don't know what that is, and here's some cream. And so many parents are starting to realize that just using steroid creams 24/7 so your kid could sleep is not okay. So what I've been seeing is, a parent will come in and they'll say, this is the problem. The skin can be so bad. This child is using for a year or two. They have to use steroid creams over and over again. We put them on a dietary nutritional healing modality for about a month. And the plan is we'll do some testing after, and then they'll come back to me and say, everything is so much better and we don't need to do any testing. So I'm seeing that more and more also with very young babies. Unfortunately, the incidence and prevalence of younger babies, even under 1, having this issue is also increasing so dramatically. And then a lot of times these babies are breastfed or they're weaned off their formula, for example. And then when we introduce the right kinds of healing foods, instead of just the standard rice cereal that is recommended for babies, but healing foods, stocks, broths, at a certain point, fermented foods, then you can actually heal younger kids are able to heal so magically. So success stories are amazing. It's not always 1 month, 2 months. Sometimes it could take a year, but as long as, in my opinion, the flares are not as frequent and not as severe, and everything is getting better, and overall in general over the course of a year, I find that to be successful.
Awesome. So where can people follow up with you to connect and make an appointment?
Yeah. So my practice is Blossom Pediatrics, and that's the website, blossompediatrics.com. We're in New York and in New Jersey now. And I also have a 30-day program for parents who are not locally it's called Rescue Your Child's Health. It's a 30-day program to start reversing chronic eczema. And you can find that on my website as well.
Awesome. So do you have a telehealth kind of opportunity for parents, or is that just a program all by itself?
It's its own program. So I wouldn't be your pediatrician, but I would be your coach through that healing process.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate it. Taking care of kids is so important. And I'm glad that you are doing what you're doing, because that is the approach I think is the best approach for whatever child is dealing with. If you can get to Dr. Gluzman and get the help that she has there, and I know that that's going to be a blessing to a lot of families and a lot of kids specifically. So I really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me on, and thank you so much for creating such a fascinating and amazing podcast. I love it.
Okay, thank you. Have a great day.